Hello once again. I am the skeletal remains of tubalcain, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is tips number 651 entitled Making a Tool Rest for a Powermatic Wood Lathe. So let's begin, shall we? In my opening there, I think I said tool rest. Actually, it's a tool rest extension for a Powermatic lathe. And these are a few phone pictures that my friends sent to me. No blueprint, but you can see that the item is 11 inches long and it has a 1-inch bore and a tapped hole on the side for that set screw lever. And it is reduced in diameter at the end to 1-inch diameter, and that hole is 4.5 inches deep. Well, it's no easy job to drill and ream or bore a hole 4.5 inches deep in solid 2-inch round stock. Well, how fortuitous is it that I just happen to have a piece of heavy wall tubing 2 inches in diameter with a 1-inch bore, and I've had this probably for 25 or 30 years, and I'm always saving things like this for just the right job. And at first I thought, well, I don't want to waste this on the job. Well, you know, what am I saving this for? I'm 77 years old, so I think this is just going to be perfect. It's going to save a lot of time, and yet it's a fairly interesting video, I think, or operation that I'm going to perform. And it's a little bit rusty, but I'm not too worried about that. And I have already faced off the end prior to me cutting it off to the correct length. And there's a separate video on that, how to set up a steady rest on a South Bend lathe, and I'm going to show you right now the name of that if you want to look that up. So here's the title of that video if you want to check it out, but I'm going to show you a short clip of that right now as I face off the end. Alright, I hope you enjoyed that little clip and saw how that I faced off a real long piece prior to me cutting it off. I had to square up the ends, of course, because they were saw cut many years ago. Well, here's a drawing that I made up with tubalcain CAD, and you can see that the item is 11 inches long and it is 2 inches in diameter. We have a step down portion here that's 2 inches by 0.993. Now I asked him, you know, does it have to be that exact? And he said, well, it's okay. He wanted the bore to be the same as that 993, and I said, how about if I just make it 1 inch, because that's what this tubing is. And you can see that that hole was to have been 4.5 inches, and there's a set screw hole right there. And well, you can look at this. I don't think it means too much to you, but I thought I'd go ahead and make a drawing. I usually do not do that. Here's the game plan. I'm going to cut this off to 9 inches right now and then reface it. This is 1-inch cold rolled steel, and it will be inserted in here to the correct depth or length, whatever you want to say. And it will be pinned in 2 spots with roll pins that look something like this. Matter of fact, that is actually them. So let me lay this out and cut it to 9 inches, just a little bit over, so I have a little bit to face off square, because my saw cuts are never very straight. Alright, I made a layout line 9 1/8 inch from the end, but believe it or not, that's almost exactly in the middle of the piece, so I put an X on there so I can remember which is the good piece. So that's the one I'm going to use. That's my backup should I screw up, and you never know. I'm out in Studio B, and I'm using my Craftsman bandsaw. It is so much better than my Wells as far as cutting straight. While I'm still in Studio B, I'm going to go ahead and face this to the layout line, but there's way too much sticking out of the chuck and the spindle is not large enough to where I can choke this up. So I'm going to move the steady rest up a little bit and face it. No big deal, because the setup is pretty much made already from that previous video that I talked about. I'm back in Studio A, and off camera I took the liberty of taking this 1-inch bar of cold finished steel, cold drawn. Some people don't like that word, cold rolled, which is, I guess, a misnomer. Anyway, I faced the end, polished it up just a little bit to get that rust off, and you can see now what a nice fit that is. So if and let's see, I cut this off to, I'm going to cut this off to 6.5. That's where the mark is there. That will allow 2 inches to stick out and give me, according to the drawing, the 4.5 inches. Let's see, that I need in this end. And then it'll be pinned. So let me go ahead and cut that off, face it. I don't know if it really needs to be faced on the end that will be in here, but pride in workmanship, I guess. I don't like the word pride. And I think I'll use the portaband to cut this off. And remember, it's not a portaband unless it says so on the label. This is a 1-inch reamer. I just want to make sure that we've got a good 1-inch bore in there. And sure enough, if anything, it might be just a hair sloppy, but pretty darn good. And I don't know what the tolerances are on something like this, but I'm sure pretty loose. Here's the 1-inch bar ready to use, marked at 2 inches. So when I bring that in to the mark, right there, on this end I have 4.5 inches. You can't quite read that. But now I intend to pin that, as I told you, in 2 places with 7/32 roll pins, spring pins, tension pins, whatever you want to call them. And why am I using 7/32? Because that's what I got. 1/4 inch might be better. So I've already marked it. There'll be one that's about 3/4 of an inch in from the end, and the other one about 3/4 of an inch in from the end of this bar. So in other words, we got 2 pins. I'm going to do that on the milling machine on the Bridgeport. So let's go on over. I'm on a parallel, and I'll pull that out when I actually start drilling, but this is liable to move on me a little bit while I'm drilling, so I like to bring it right up to the layout line, and then I'm going to put a little drill press vise on that, tighten it down, and that will keep it from moving on me. Just common sense, I guess. Off camera, I used an edge finder to find the center of the 2-inch stock. Probably not that critical, but your eye would detect it if it was very far off. This probably could be welded in place even. Two things. Use some oil, wear your safety glasses. I pushed the parallel back. Now, since this will slide, I'm just going to hold my hand on there so that it doesn't work its way out. I know it can't work its way in, but until I establish the hole, and then it's not going to go anywhere. I really don't like the idea of hammering while it's in the milling machine, but let me see if I can get it in there enough to where it holds the rod. There we go. Now that can be taken off, and it's not going to go anywhere, and I'll move into position and drill the other hole. And now for the second hole, and it is identical. As long as I'm set up in the mill, I'm going to go ahead and drill and tap this hole 2 inches from the end for that set screw handle. And so I'm already on center, and let's go. Lately I've been using chalk because it shows up better. It's not an accurate way to do it, but some of these dimensions aren't that critical. And this is a 5/16 stubby drill bit. That's the tap drill size for 3/8/16. This is a 3/8/16 tapered tap. I'm in back gears and running it in reverse. I had to finish up with a tap wrench because the tap kept slipping in the chuck. And drill chucks are not made to hold taps anyway. They have hardened jaws, and this is hardened steel, so they do tend to slip. Okay, out it comes to finish it up at the workbench. I don't know if I've talked much about roll pins. You can buy them in any hardware store. They'll have a little selection like this, and they're going to overcharge you for them, but that's the way it goes. So the beauty of them is that they are removable and that you do not need to ream the holes. You just need to drill a hole of that nominal size. In other words, if it's a 1/4 inch, you drill it 1/4 inch because these are oversized. I like to oil them and drive them with a brass or copper hammer. And there's the tapped hole. And I'll run that reamer through here. I'm sure there's a little bit of a burr. I hope it takes it off. Just about done, except for possibly a little polishing, and you know how I hate that finish work. And I think that I will take the Noga let's polish it up a bit, but it isn't going to look real great because this is pretty well pitted. Now this is not a live center. It's a fixed center, bull nose, whatever you want to call it, pipe center. So I'm using a little bit of this. However, there won't be much pressure against that because I'm not turning, I'm just polishing. I'll put that in there like that. This blue cloth is 80 grit, pretty aggressive. Not great by any means, but now for a little 180, and that'll be good enough. I think I'll squirt a little WD-40 on there and see what that does, if anything. Makes it look a little bit better, but I'm going to tell them to paint it flat black. Many of you will understand this, but if you're a newbie, you might not. It is very difficult to drill and ream and or bore a real large, real deep hole like that. Matter of fact, you could spend really hours on that. Now, it's a little easier if you have massive machinery like A-bomb and a few others, but with my smaller machinery, that is just a big job. And a boring bar flexes like crazy when you got that much sticking out. It'd be a lot more than this. So even if I would have had some 2-inch cold rolled around here, I would much have preferred doing it this way. So I was glad to have that bar of heavy wall tubing. Well, my skeletal remains need a little nap right now. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please watch some of my others and subscribe and ring that stupid bell, which does not seem to work anymore, but this is tubalcain saying so long for now.